Welcome, welcome, grandparents, with your grandchildren for this natural connection that you're looking to enthuse into your lives. And also those who are 55 plus years young, you're looking to support grandparents and grandchildren or children in their connection with the outer doors. And you're looking for ideas that might be of support to you. And today, what I'm going to do is take a look at the connection around well living from a wealth perspective. And wealth means well-being and well living to the nth degree. And there are hinders to that well living that I wanted to go over with you. And this is born of years in the workplace, working with teams and organizations to get better at the organization of work. But it also comes from a place of being a whitewater rafting guide, trip guide. In other words, I took care of the trip, and therefore I would have many rafts that I was overseeing. And what would it mean to get it organized in such a way is that we avoided any mishaps? And this video is a sort of a summary that would be available to you if you find yourself organizing an event in the natural world with your grandchildren, and or you're assisting grandparents with their grandchildren, and you find yourself more into a group. You're starting to develop a community involvement with the outer doors. And I wanted to just bring to your attention some ways in which you might find yourself hindered or held back from having an extraordinary experience. And that's where we're going with the diagram that is here. Now, before I dive into it, please remember to subscribe, ring the bell, comment, like, and share, because I so enjoy learning with you. And you might have questions, and let's see if I can get those responses to you in a way that is helpful. Now, what I'm going to do with this diagram is explain what each of the letters are about. And down below, I'll put the word in the caption format. But also I wanted to just mention is that I shot a video about the hinders of wealth from a well-being perspective, and you'll find it above. You can check that one out because that's a little bit more about you as an individual, versus this one is more about you interacting with others, being with others. So let's get started. What we're going to do is take a look at the S, and this R here. Now, the first S is about the strategy or direction in which you are going, because if you're taking the strategy of driving out for the day into an outdoor environment versus you're driving out to go for an overnight camping, or you're driving out to go for a multi-day camping, or you're going into a park in your city or around where you live, which has a little bit deeper connection to the outdoors, you're taking a step into it a little bit deeper, then that direction, that strategy, there is something you've got to do to get that organized. In the city in which I live, there are some parks inside the city itself that if you get yourself tucked away in them and you get injured, you may not be found for a little bit of time unless you have taken the stay found precautions that go with your involvement in the outer doors. And I'll be doing a video about that element alone sometime in the near future. What I'm attempting to do is you've got to think through your involvement with the outer doors, with nature, and make sure that the strategy, the direction in which you're going, you understand what it's about. Because if not, what will happen is you'll develop what are called blinders, and you'll find yourself out there and getting sort of narrowed down, and I can only see so much, when in fact you have to see a lot more about what's going on. If you find yourself later in the day and the weather's changing, what does that mean? You'll have to sort of change your strategy, change your direction, and see what happens so that it's safer for your involvement. So that's the blinders that go with the strategy. This S here is about structure, or the arrangement of the event, of the your involvement in the out of doors. again, is if you're using equipment like you're going to take a canoe out, how prepared are you with the canoe? And do you know how to paddle? Do you have life jackets? All the safety components of it. But even the structure of going for a simple walk in the wintertime, and you're going to use snowshoes for the very first time, have you had an opportunity to practice in a local park with the use of those snowshoes? Again, there's a structure, how you're going to organize your outdoor experience that you've got to take into consideration. And one of the things here, from a structure point of view, I would just remind you is that when you start to get into the temperatures of like 0 to 10 degrees centigrade, sometimes that's where some of the greatest challenges come, because you might not know that you're actually getting colder. And that's where ideas like hypothermia can start to creep in to your involvement. And if you've got the kids out there and they've got wet feet, or they're wet against their skin because they've sweated, perspired, glowed, then you have to take that into consideration as you structure your involvement and how you organize what's going to take place. And therefore, what becomes important here is your routines. And sometimes we get into routines and we just do the same thing every time we go out. We might wear the same clothes, but that may not actually meet the needs of that trip. So be really alert to falling into the same routine, taking the same equipment without really thinking about where you're going and what you're going to be doing. You have to get alert that every time you move into that natural environment, each trip has something that's a little bit different to it. And therefore, think about the structure that you're going to use so that you don't get caught in an old routine not working in your current involvement. So I'm hoping I've made that connection for you, because I've seen it happen many, 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 many times. And in my own life, when I experienced that the first time, I did not do it again. I just did not do it that way. I always checked the structure that I was going to work with. The next one I want to take a look at is the relationships of those who are with you, the connections that you have, because relationships need to be supportive, but also you have to understand is that if someone has to claim the leadership role, especially in an emergency, it's not going to be questioned because you've sorted that out all ahead of time. Because the relationships, that interaction with one another, your life could depend on it. And having taught wilderness remote first aid for about 25 years, this was one of the elements that I always had to strengthen with people is if you're going to go for a walk in the outdoors and you're being introduced to people for the first time, it's better to ask before you take a step into the outdoors, especially with your grandchildren with you, to know who is on the trip with you. Are they on any medications? How fit are they in terms of what terrain you're going to go over? Look at the clothes that they're wearing. These are the things that you need to take into consideration from a relationship, and that leans into the structure and back. And it might influence the strategy, the direction that you're going to head into. Just before I drop out away from relationships, the S here is about shackles. And what happens sometimes is you get used to going out into the outdoors, and someone has always taken the organization of the trip, and you think by default they're the leader, and you shackle yourself to that relationship, when in fact someone who might be on a canoe trip may not be the person you would want to lead on a hiking trip. Again, just take a look at it so you don't get caught shackled to an old way of looking at things, because it could get someone hurt. Another area I'd like to take a look at is these elements here, because again, you may have seen in cartoons where you've got a wagon and you're pulling it, and you get these sort of lines around it suggesting it's moving. This whole strategy, structure, relationship, it's moving. Okay, it's not static. And therefore, what you got to do is pay attention to the communication that's taking place in you, the communication within the group, communication with the grandchildren, communication with if there's two of you as grandparents, or the parents are along, is how are you communicating with one another? Because it becomes so important, right? Because the communication that you use does coordinate the behavior of others in the group. So great communication usually gets you a great situation, a great experience, if not an extraordinary experience. So one of the things that can happen is that you can get into something what's called dogma. And from a dogma point of view, what we're doing is they're saying there's certain principles and practices that you have been using that you're so held to that you think that they're true, when in fact that may not be the case. As the grandchildren get older, they're going to test out what they can do and what they can't do. And if you keep holding them reining them in so that they can't have a full expression in the natural world, you could diminish their appreciation of the natural world. And sometimes you've got to let them have a little bit more of a free rein, again, from a safer perspective. So if you get caught where you find yourself going, well, that's how we always go into the outer doors, that's how we always interact with the natural world, let that go, ding, ding, and challenge that to see if that is still true. You might find that it's not. And if it's not, it's going to influence the communication and the interaction of these elements. And you're going to have to shift the way in which you organize your outdoor experience. And this becomes particularly important, if I haven't emphasized it enough, is that as the grandchildren grow with you in their interactions with the outer doors, you've got to pay attention, because these will shift. And the great thing is, often what'll happen is the grandchildren will become your nature-based educators. And that's a wonderful experience when it happens. Now, what I wanted to do with all of this is that these are all premised on what's called the resources that are available to you. And the resources that I'm speaking about are time, effort, and money. So the time, the effort, and money associated with the group and their experience in the outer doors, you've got to take that into consideration. If you're going out for a day and night, a couple of days with a night, a couple of days with 2 nights, that time influences what happens and how the organization of the people, the organization of what is going to take place, the organization of the effort that's required, it can shift. And how might it shift? I live in an area where it can be sunny and warm, and the next day it can be snowing. And so are you prepared for that? Have you developed a prevention mindset? And is the group all on board with you as you're organizing this perspective? And the money that you have available to you, while important because it might be able to get you some of the latest and greatest technologies, don't let that money and technologies and the newest fool you, because sometimes people will bring new technologies and they don't know how to use it, and it actually can give you a false sense of safety. So think about it, the resources you have, the time, effort, and money, use them wisely in their application for the actions that you're going to take. And if I was to share with you the ABCs, just remember the following: action, behavior, consequences. So when you're with other people, the actions that you take, whether yourself or as a group or another person, and the behaviors that that brings out, get you a set of consequences. And therefore, would you not want to organize what you do so that the actions that you're taking, the behaviors that are being demonstrated, gets you a consequence of an extraordinary experience? That's what I've attempted to do over the years as I have interacted with people in all different kinds of settings. And this has helped me to organize that outdoor environment so that I don't get into any hinders with Wellth living. And by using this, I get into a place where I can limit the hinders and really emphasize, enthuse the well living aspect. I'm not going to go so far as to say that you can organize it to the point that nothing ever happens. There's always a little bit of surprises. However, the degree to which that surprise added to the experience can be tempered by what it is you do in terms of organizing it. So I'm going to leave that with you now and remind you to subscribe, ring the bell, comment, like, and share, because again, I love to learn from you. And maybe there's something here you want to share. There will be other resources that I will be adding over time. There is a little short course that I'm going to be creating. At the moment, when I'm shooting this video, it's sort of like the 103 tips, tools, and techniques that you can use as you move yourself and your grandchildren into the outer doors, what to take into consideration if you're going for a longer involvement, maybe even an overnight, what might you have to think about from that perspective. And then there's other resources around, identification of trees and how to do some group activities. If you come back to Wellth Learning TV, which is where you're probably watching this video, if not, when you click it, you will get a connection to YouTube if you find yourself somewhere else. And there will be other videos that you can tap into to get more insights. So again, this one was really about what are hindering the wealth aspect of your involvement in the outer doors from a wealth living, from a group, interacting with a group of people, whether you know them or they're new to their involvement with you in the outer doors. So again, if I can be of assistance, just drop a question below and let's see what happens. And with that, take care.